Steve Ridgeway here with my oldest son Sterling, and we have these really cool talks in the car sometimes, and I always think to myself, man, I wish we were recording this because I think other people would be interested in hearing what we've got to say. And I had a question that I wanted to ask him, and say hello, I guess.
Hello.
Hey. And what I wanted to ask him was, when it comes to being a sovereign in a royalty situation like the Queen of England or King Ludwig, other kings, the czars in Russia, what determines your sovereignty, or what determines what makes you qualified to be a royal, to be recognized by the people as a royal? Is it a bloodline? Is it a...
Well, sovereignty ultimately has to do with power. For example, society wants to take as much from you as possible in the way of your labor. So if you're a road worker, you produce labor. And then you want to take as much from society as possible in the way of food, housing, entertainment, things like that. And so society is sort of a struggle between society in the abstract and the individual. Monarchies sort of serve to organize this. And as long as they are not overbearing in their authority, they can maintain that. But when they do become overbearing, like we saw in the English Revolution, they overthrow the king. There is an element of bloodline and whatnot to that because of cultural reasons. Culture does have some power. But ultimately what it comes down to is the well-being of their subjects and the maintenance of their nation.
Right, so the willingness of the people to accept their not divinity, but their authority, I guess. But
well, that's part of it, but it's also a balance because the monarchy has to protect itself from its own people. Right. But it has to do so in such a way that it doesn't become tyrannical in the eyes of the people.
Right. If they, I guess some don't care.
Well, those who don't care would have to have an incredible amount of institutional power to make sure that those structures don't fall.
Right.
In North Korea, their people are so weak and indoctrinated that the North Korean government can basically do whatever it wants. That would not have been the case in England, for example. The people had enough power and influence in their institutions that they did pose a legitimate threat to the monarchy.
Right. And then the monarchs, that's why they had the castles and things set up the way they did to protect themselves from not only attacking nations, like in the case of England, the French were coming in, and they'd have the sieges and things, but that was also to protect themselves from the people that they were that were sick and tired of their nonsense.
That, and also it was a symbol of their authority. If you see your king with his tens of thousands of men and his massive castles and whatnot, you are going to be more fearful of those institutions and actually overthrowing them. So it was also a sign of power.
Right. Yeah, just the imposing size of the building and the presence of the warriors, I guess. I don't know what you'd call them. Not necessarily knights, because I think the knights were in and of themselves leaders, or
to some extent.
Yeah, in their territory that they were over, maybe.
Yeah. It was in some sense almost sort of a house of cards, in the sense that they had to maintain this aura of strength, but in actuality the people at any point could overthrow them. That was the theory that was posited during the Enlightenment. I forget which thinker exactly posited it, but the idea of the consent of the people, I forget what exactly it's called, but basically that by allowing those governmental institutions to exist, they are consenting to that. It's more complicated than that. I wouldn't say that in and of itself is necessarily consent, but they are definitely allowing those institutions to exist. But sometimes those institutions existing is preferable to them not existing, even if those institutions are oppressive.
Right. So it's not necessarily a willingness, but the necessity to accept it for the sake of surviving.
Yeah, and that's why democracy is philosophically a more justifiable institution, is because we do have to have some form of a state, at least for now, and certainly back then. I think ideally, maybe in the future, we could have like a Star Trek stateless society. But until we get there, there does have to be some form of a state, and that state is preserves itself inherently through violence. But with a democracy, we kind of have some say in exactly what the government does with that authority, which is why democracy is preferable to monarchy, where for the most part, the only way that you can have any control over the institution is through direct violence.
Right. So democracy, if you don't like the violence of the current dictator, you hopefully can vote him out on the next cycle.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Right. Okay, well, that would certainly be preferable to, being run through with a spear or shot with a bow and arrow. That I'm thinking in medieval times.
Right, yeah.
Medieval England. Interesting. So the sovereignty of a leader is based on the willingness of the people to accept their rule or their office, I guess. I guess what I'm wondering is, in the bloodline situation, you got people, for years and years, single families running, England. I'm just sticking with England because I watch a lot of videos about the way England has developed over the centuries, and starting with the Saxons, the Romans, then it went into medieval times, the Tudors, Well, in Venice, the upper class, the wealthy of society, are descendants of the same upper class from 600 years ago. And so this wealth is generational. It preserves itself through time. And it's sort of this similar with monarchies and bloodlines, as they sort of preserve their wealth and power in the family. And because of their power, their institutional power, they can get away with that. Okay, so wealth, your ability to maintain a standing army may be as much of a indicator or oh, absolutely, yeah. Put you in power. The bloodlines is just an aesthetic. It's no different than like the American flag. It's just a symbol. It doesn't have any inherent power behind it. Although it is more complicated than that when it comes to things like, for example, the Anglo-Saxons. A lot of them claimed that they were descended from Odin, which is absurd because Odin was a god, a Germanic god. In early England, he had basically by that point been reduced to just an ancestral figure. He wasn't really viewed as a god. He was viewed as a king that current kings can claim their descendants from to justify their own brutality and violence. And so they used it to justify their brutality. But ultimately what it comes down to is they were the most brutal, they were the most violent, and so they had the most power. Okay. Yeah. It's just things that I think of while I'm going down the road, I watch a video or two, and then, the next day I'll wake up and all day long I'll be trying to digest what I saw in the video and the information that I got, and it just that was just something that I thought about, is what makes a monarch, and That's cool. So I mean, I don't know. I guess we're just a couple guys talking, so you don't have to take all of this stuff to the bank and say, "Oh, they said it was so, so it's so." It's our opinions, but it's based a little bit in stuff that we've seen and read and researched over the years. So pretty interesting. Well, okay, so I guess we can wrap this up, and maybe if you guys like this, hit the like button, and we'll try and do one of these every couple of weeks or once a month or something like that. But I think every couple of weeks might be a nice timeline to do it in. So, all right. Well, I appreciate you coming on with me, and let's look forward to doing some more in the future.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye. See you next time.